What I'm going to share with you today might just change your life. If you're autistic, you live a life that often doesn't make sense, but I can change that. For autistic folks, this is something you need to know, especially if you have questions about why you struggle where others seem to thrive. For others, it's a window into our lives, a revealing glimpse of how and why autistic brains tick differently. Today, we're talking about the Autistic Triad of Distinction and how it was the key that allowed me to make autism make sense. I'm Quinn, and I'm autistic. Welcome to Autistic. From the moment I uttered my first word, people treated me like a curiosity, an anomaly amongst my peers. On my childhood journey through the education system, the vocabulary on my school reports grew increasingly menacing as my peculiarity seemed less and less cute with every inch I grew. While my teachers were running out of polite ways to say, "weirdo child," I had concerns of my own, puzzles to solve, and only a few short years of childhood left to solve them in. I could fill volumes just listing them individually, but most of them boiled down to this. Why was it I found some difficult things really easy and other really easy things impossible to grasp? The autism diagnosis bestowed on me as a 1980s schoolboy didn't answer enough of my questions. Hardly anyone knew what autism was back then, and even academic understanding was still just getting off the starting blocks, so I had nowhere to turn for advice or insight. If I wanted to get a handle on this and have some say over my own future, I'd have to go it alone and work it out for myself. The Autistic Triad of Distinction had to click in my mind before I could truly make sense of what being autistic meant for me, and without it, this channel wouldn't exist. It was a long time coming together, a lifetime's labour, you might say. But once everything slotted into place, my triad framework helped me make connections and draw parallels that opened my eyes to better ways of communicating and strategies that made my life easier. It's allowed me to understand myself better and get my needs across more constructively than ever before. Without it, I'd lack much of the confidence and resilience that's got me through the last few difficult years, and I wouldn't have been able to shape my environment, plan ahead, or know when to ask for help. It's offered me breathing room in an increasingly unpredictable and hostile world. If you've seen or heard anything on Autistic that's cleared the mists for you, made new connections, or helped you see something in a new light, especially if it helped you feel better about yourself, one way or another, the Triad of Distinction played a part in it. Talk to as many autistic people as I have across as broad a range of age and experience, and you'll also find that school reports like mine were pretty common for autistic students, diagnosed or not. Even those who were model pupils weren't immune to such thinking, though they were more likely to be enigmas or prodigies than an irksome and seemingly insoluble problem, as I apparently was. I was diagnosed during what a psychologist friend of mine likes to call the dark ages of autism. So, unlike most autistic people of my age, I've known I'm autistic for just over 40 years. For that reason alone, I've been paying particular attention whilst academic and public understanding of what makes autistic people different has steadily increased, because I've known all along how much it would impact on my future. Today, the experts do know a lot more than any of us did back then. Most GPs and school teachers feel pretty confident they can spot an autistic kid when they see one, and almost everybody in the world has at least heard of autism. Yet, despite all that progress that I watched in real time across 4 decades, we're still a long way from where we need to be. After all, that's why you're here, isn't it? You're seeking understanding here that you haven't found elsewhere. When I came out of that psychologist's office as a teenager with a diagnosis that nobody else had ever heard of, I was on my own. There was literally no one at all to guide me. No educational support, no medical help, no accessible information, not to mention no peer group, no friends with the same diagnosis, not even any way of meeting any. For almost a decade, I had a diagnosis that wasn't even listed in any of the manuals doctors refer to, and I could only find referenced in obscure scientific journals I had to specially request to be ordered in at the local library. I set out to solve the mystery of what being autistic meant for me, and now, 40-odd years later, I'm making this video about it. This triad of distinction I'm offering to share with you is an evolving understanding built on a lifetime of successes and defeats, revelations and false starts, friends made and lost as I lived a life autistic and took notes as I went along. This is the first of 3 videos going up over 3 days. If you want the triad to work for you, I think you'll need to watch all 3 to get a firm handle on it, and I'll be making plenty more triad videos in the coming months and years. This first chapter is the foundation course, if you like, and sets the stage for what's to come, but I've broken it into 3 digestible chunks to make for easier viewing. Hopefully I can condense into 3 YouTube videos the basics of what it took me 40 years to learn. All the videos are fully captioned as usual, and there will be a transcript available on Autismatic.com soon. If there's a ring of familiarity about autism and triads, it's because there was indeed another triad associated with autism some years ago. In the 1970s, British doctors Lorna Wing and Judith Gould came up with the Autism Triad of Impairments. It was designed as an aid for diagnosticians, and it stuck around for a long time. They enhanced the existing checklists of behaviours and subjective observations that informed autism diagnosis up until then, with a trio of deficits, a trifecta of failures, that would go on to help specialists to more easily recognise and characterise the differences between autistic people and everyone else. They split the observations of differences into 3 corners of an autistic social impairment triangle, which together gave psych professionals a clearer idea of where and what to look for when considering an autism diagnosis. They were straightforward enough that family doctors, teachers and police were all able to identify when someone's out of the ordinary behaviour might point to autism. If someone appeared to be impaired in all 3 areas of social interaction, social communication and social imagination, then they were likely autistic. Wing and Gould's triad would go on to become a keystone of the diagnostic process for autism. It gave more diagnosticians the confidence to identify autistic deficits in individuals under their care. As an attempt to introduce greater clarity and accessibility to an otherwise mysterious and opaque diagnosis, it was a success. And it certainly played a part when I first learned of my own autism in the 1980s. It isn't a great tool for self-awareness, though, let alone self-improvement. Looking at that list of impairments and superimposing it onto your own life isn't just difficult. It's heartbreaking. I've known plenty of folks pushed to tears of shame, embarrassment, or even rage at the things written on their diagnostic statements based on those criteria. What we go into hoping to be enlightening and empowering can end up disappointing and demoralising. Of course, we've learned a lot about autism since the 1970s, especially in recent years now that actually autistic researchers have started to have some input into the discussion. Theories such as monotropism and the double empathy problem have paved the way for autistic-led observations which are changing the way we look at old pathologies. They've added genuine substance to our previously spotty understanding of the functional differences between autistic and neurotypical minds, even if the progress from knowledge to positive action has been slow. In the 40 years following my diagnosis, I continued making observations, comparing notes with other autists in early online communities, and keeping abreast of any new or revised literature. Always on the lookout for that revolutionary theory that would fill in the gaps of my own comprehension. Across decades, I read hundreds of case studies and observations, statistics and meta-analyses, speculative hypotheses and promising theories, but they always seemed to be missing something. Why was there so much academic speculation about why autistic people do things with so little input from autistic people? Where exactly did we fit into the knowledge-building process? Why wasn't there already a two-way research pipeline in place? I'd read paper after paper on different aspects of autistic behaviour, along with interpretations, correlations and speculations on what might trigger it, inspire it, or be the underlying cause of it. All done from more or less the same perspective as a zoologist taking notes on chimpanzees playing with building blocks. Their theories all stemmed from watching, extrapolating and reasoning, not by asking. I mean, yes, there would be responses from their subjects listed from time to time, but not as an answer to the question, more a curiosity for further inquiry. I didn't meet anyone else who was autistic until I went online in the early 90s. But as soon as I did, I set about asking questions and starting awkward conversations. I was quite annoying at first, I'm sure of it, but I soon learned better ways of talking to other autists and learning from them. I was on a quest for insight into my own struggles, searching for common threads with other people like me, hoping that where we faced common obstacles, we might also find common ways around them. I knew how easy it was for me to wind people up the wrong way without even trying. And I seemed to make a lot more mistakes in life that were apparently my own fault than most of my peers. But understanding why wasn't a complete mystery to me. I often had a working theory about why things went wrong. I just needed a little feedback and cooperation to confirm it so I could make adjustments. There was a chain of cause and effect in everything I did or said or reacted with, even if I couldn't see all the links in the chain straight away. Presumably, other autistic folks wrestled with similar issues and saw parallel patterns too, so perhaps between us, we could find the missing pieces and put it all together. I've overanalyzed every mistake, misstep and misunderstanding I've ever had in my life. Every night whilst I waited to drift off to sleep, I'd fret over the events of the day or of events years past. I'd remember some relevance to a detail I'd disregarded before, or realise some context I hadn't considered that would set my thoughts racing. And I've done the same with all my successes and pretty much every offhand remark too. Ever since I started meeting other autistic people, I've been asking them about their experiences. But I'm not just interested in what happened to them, but why. What else was going on at the time? What were they thinking or expecting? What was said to them, done for them, denied to them, inflicted upon them? What else had been going on that day or should have been going on, but most importantly, how did all of that make them feel? And how did those feelings change as the day or the event went on, leading up to the moment of confusion or disconnection they so wished they could have avoided? Between my understanding of my own ups and downs and my conversations with other autistic people about what caused us all the most troubles in life, I came to realise that there were three broad factors that seemed to play a big role in every disconnection we experience with the world. When I said maybe I'd find some common ground with other autistic people, this was what I'd been looking for. Whenever I felt the floodwaters rising in me, threatening an impending stress event, I recognised that all three of these factors played a part, and that opened the door to understanding. That's how I made autism make sense. This channel is all one man's work, mine, of course. Much as I wish I had the time, I don't put out videos for the sake of putting out videos. I'd rather say nothing than fill the silence with empty words. I'm trying to say something worthwhile, maybe even enlightening, that might help you feel better about yourself. My writing and this channel are my only source of income, so every like and share really makes a difference. If you can afford to help support me to keep doing my work and you feel in a generous mood, then please hop over to Patreon to make a monthly donation. Or you can leave me a one-off thanks here on YouTube or buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. Links to all of that are in the description. The Triad of Impairment of the 1970s was designed by non-autistic scientists for non-autistic practitioners to more easily diagnose and categorize us by outside observation. My autistic Triad of Distinction of the present is a very different beast. It's homegrown for a start. I came up with it, so it's an autistic-led tool, conceived and designed by an autist to help other autists make sense of what's different about us. Not by extrapolating from a dry and depressing list of dreary deficits and doom, but from an informed perspective of personal awareness and self-trust. So we can make informed choices about how to lead our lives, how to protect ourselves, who to let into our lives, and how to be happier in our own skins. If nobody else is going to point us in the right direction, we just have to find it ourselves. The old Triad of Impairment told us we were deficient in social interaction, in social communication, and in social imagination. The triad I came up with for this century drops deficits in behaviour in favour of differences in processing, in 3 key areas of thought. Compared to the average, autistic people aren't quite the same in 3 distinct areas of the human experience. First off, our emotional processes work differently to most of the people we meet. We feel different things at different times and not always at the same intensity. Our senses, too, don't always provide the same feedback to our conscious minds as a neurotypical person does. So our world looks and sounds different. Finally, there's the autistic need for informational and organisational fidelity we call veracity. All those quirks of our nature about routines, truth and order are very uniquely autistic and the source of a lot of interpersonal friction. Every time something in my life goes sideways, there's a combination of stresses that come from my autistic emotions, autistic senses, and autistic veracity. They may not make for very tidy or academic-sounding labels from a diagnostic point of view, but they are the 3 main areas of conscious processing of our awareness that distinguish autistic people from others who are not autistic. So it's a triad of distinction. To be autistic is to be always aware of our discontinuity with the mainstream, to be permanently wired into spiky senses and tidal feelings with little escape or release from endless reminders of our fractured relationship with a counterintuitive world. Every confusion, quandary, misunderstanding and overload I've been through has featured a combination of emotional disparity, sensory discomfort and acute sensitivity to contradiction. And I'm far, far from alone. Every time I've shared this framework with other autists, and most ADHDers if I'm honest, it's lit sparks of recognition that have started some of the most fascinating and enlightening conversations of my life. Growing up autistic, with or without a diagnosis, we soon notice how often our understanding, our worldview, or just our sense of humour can be way out of step with the rest of the world. Any of us who managed to get as far as secondary or middle school without a diagnosis will still have had more than their fair share of being called a freak or a weirdo anyway, only for that to be replaced by more condition-specific language should they get diagnosed. Every day, autists face new challenges as we're assaulted by everyday stimuli that other people seem to take in their stride. And we do our very best to look like we're doing the same. We don't seek to be the odd ones out, but we find ourselves on the fringes anyway because we don't fit the mould expected of us. It can throw up barriers in education, in employment, in healthcare, and even in forming lasting and meaningful relationships. The triad helped me to understand how my balance gets disrupted and by what, so I can plan ahead and customize my personal environment and schedule to avoid the worst of it, so I have a better chance of coping with the bits of life we don't get any choice in. Few people know the full details of what's been going on in my life recently, but I can say, without a moment's hesitation, that they've been amongst the most challenging years of my whole life. I'd not have coped without the framework of the triad to make sense of things for me. I'd have slipped into depression like I used to and maybe lost everything. I'll go into a lot more detail about the triad and how you can apply it to your life in the next couple of videos, but it boils down to this. All us autists experience stresses or difficulties that we've come to see as autistic in nature. They're the ones that set our autistic floodwaters rising when our senses are overloaded, our feelings are getting too much to handle, we're frustrated by disorder or misinformation, and no matter how loud we scream for help, nobody seems to hear us. Being autistic plays a role in the way we experience and process emotions, so we frequently find that our reactions are different to others around us. That causes confusion for ourselves and others and can lead to conflict. Around half of us are alexithemic, meaning that we can experience delays or disconnections from our emotional responses, which put us at odds with our companions, and many of us express ourselves vocally or physically in ways which are frequently misinterpreted. There's increasing suggestions that lots of us may be overly sensitive to the affective emotions of others, something known as being hyperempathic, which can make separating our own feelings from those of others difficult and lead to rapid overwhelm. The first leaf of the Triad of Distinction is the disparity between our emotional processing and whatever the local idea of normal happens to be. Most autistic people sense the world differently to everyone around us. No, it doesn't mean we use echolocation to get around or that we can see in ultraviolet, but it does mean that our brains process sensory information differently. The world inside our heads might not look or sound quite the same as the one in someone else's. For example, all of us may hear through functionally similar ears, but before any of us consciously register a sound, the signals pass through our brains via auditory processing and preconceptual filters, and those are often different. What we consciously register might be noticeably different to the non-autist sat next to us, causing confusion and potential conflict which adds to the flood. Synesthesia, face blindness, and aphantasia also affect our sensory perceptions in ways that can disadvantage us socially or make communication difficult. Add to that, many of us sense our own bodies quite differently too. Those senses we call interoception. They give us feedback about our health and well-being. They can work differently too. Some of us don't feel hunger or fatigue, our pain response may be inconsistent, or we might not recognise the differences between certain sensations. We may also pick up on sensory information that neurotypical people can't sense or have learned to tune out in a way that we haven't. The second leaf of the triad, then, is our sensory distinctions. The last leaf of the Triad of Distinction was the most difficult one for me to attach a label to, because it's the one that non-autistic people seem to find the most challenging to take on board. Yet, almost every autistic friend I've shared it with has picked up on it immediately. Veracity comes from the same roots as the word verify, the Latin verus or truth. This can be a big one for many of us. If something can't be corroborated, contradicts itself, or just doesn't make sense, it can cause a peculiarly autistic kind of stress. Our veracity is being challenged when we think we're being lied to or misled, or when people drop big hints but avoid being explicit, leaving us none the wiser. When we get told we're being too literal or we're explaining in too much detail, our veracity is tingling, or when the product we bought doesn't live up to the claims made in the ads. It's also what's hurting when our routines are disrupted or when we think something is unfair, even if nobody else sees why. Veracity often looms large when we have communication problems, and it's a big contributor for many of us who go silent under stress. Whenever the world or another person fails to behave according to our expectations, our sense of veracity has taken a beating and our flood waters rise. If your view of autism is one of deficit and a list of aberrant behaviours, then my Triad of Distinction offers a chance of seeing it differently, more constructively, perhaps. If nothing else, at least you know it comes from an autistic viewpoint and is backed up by years of experience and investigation. For everyone else who already knows that being autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, or in any other way neurodivergent is just a natural expression of the range of skills necessary for a species like ours to develop things like science, civilization, or even language, it won't be quite such a culture shock. Most of the foundational beliefs about autistic thought, feelings, and behaviour didn't come from people who actually knew. They were the theories and assumptions of non-autistic academics based on one-sided observations of mainly institutionalised, largely non-speaking children. 40 years of progress from my own diagnosis hasn't seen those core assumptions of deficit, impairment, and poor life outcomes shift very far, and you have to ask yourself, why didn't they just ask us? I've spent 40 years of my life building the Triad of Distinction from an inkling into an idea and finally into a functioning framework, a system that helped me make autism make sense. Maybe it'll help you make your autism make sense too. In the next 2 videos, I'll talk about the Triad in much more detail. I'll show you how the Triad works and how it maps onto many of the autism traits we're all familiar with, but most importantly, I'll show you how to use it yourself. But until then, I'm Quinn and I'm autistic. Thank you for watching, and see you in part 2 of how I made autism make sense.